Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and video show which brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience from hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe so you won't miss a new episode. I'm your host, Frits Bussemaker, and today I'm delighted and privileged to have a conversation with Xavier Mufraggi. Xavier, welcome to the program.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
Allow me to briefly introduce where you're coming from to the audience. You started with craft foods a couple of years ago. Then for over 15 years, you had various roles at Club Med. Definitely something we will cover during the interview. You're currently the CEO of YPO, the Young Presidents Organization, but you will move to become a partner of Eloquem Consulting Group. But at the same time, you're also a board member of the Mufraggi, a family-owned business, which your grandfather started. And you also run triathlons, and you are an Ironman finisher. So well done there. Now, your friend's born in Paris and live in the USA. So again, Xavier, welcome to The Brand Called You. And in my preparation, I came across a very exciting video, and that's going to be in the starting one. Can you guess what?
Oh, is there something with my hair? Did I have long hair?
Undercover Boss. Yes. You were on the program Undercover Boss. For the people who do not know that program, can you briefly describe what it is and how it happened?
Oh, wow. So Undercover Boss, I did the program. It was 3 years ago. The plot is easy, is that you're in my case, one of your resorts when I was at Club Med, and you arrive like, new employees for the team. And you discover what you don't usually see about your organization when you're the CEO. So it's give you a good perspective about the reality about what's happening in your business, and especially give you the ability to connect with 5 outstanding team members and realize that, if they were not there was no way your company would have success. It's also funny. It's a funny show to watch. It's a draining show to do. In my case, it was 12 days, 20 hours a day of filming. And that's why it's so successful. You see really raw emotional moment and connection moment in between the CEO and the team members.
Yeah, I definitely was able to watch the full episode because and it shows you your style of leadership. It also shows your vision on inclusivity. That's what I covered there. But I wanted to come back how it all started, because you started off with EdTech, I believe, one of the major business schools in France. How did that come about? Is that something you've come to understand doing business, or was it something you have as a person in you?
Oh, wow. I think there's 2 parts. I mean, there's the business part and your personal life. And at one point, they collide with each other. So on inclusivity, authenticity, diversity, always been something very important for me because my dad worked for an oil company, Exxon. And so we had the ability to live in a lot of different countries in my childhood. So I was born in France, but I lived in Europe. I lived in Western Africa. I lived in the US. My wife is British. She also did like a lot of experience everywhere. And I started to work with an American company, Kraft Mondelez, in Europe, West and Eastern Europe, in some ways in operations. Before I moved to a French company in the US and Latin America. So from my career and my personal experience, I've always been in contact with a lot of people from around the world. From our clients from around the world, to even our shareholders in Club Med were Chinese private equity. So that's always been something I was interested in, not only traveling in different places, but really live in foreign country, learn the language, learn the culture, test the food with no judgment, and realize what life was for other people than myself. And that gave me such an amazing perspective about how the world can be, and the magic that can happen when you're able to connect people with very different background, very kind of, race, religion, sex orientation. That always been something great in my experience, is that when you could put all these pieces together, how great an organization can be.
So, and that's something, so you promote with Club Med, so people come and relax, have a holiday. Is that something which you want to just give your employees, or is it also something you want to be part of the whole Club Med experience? So everybody who would come there is welcome.
Yeah, I think it's, I think you, at one point, because you also have, younger people listening to the program, I heard, when you choose the company you want to work with, it's very important that the value of the organization are in synchronization with your own values. So in my case, I wanted to be challenged. I was very ambitious in business. So, Kraft Foods, Mondelez, or Club Med are very, very eager to get ambitious people and also to drive results. But in both cases, there was really in Kraft a huge emphasis in diversity and leadership training. And at Club Med, a huge emphasis on promoting people, no matter diploma they had. Okay. And being promoted as fast as your ability could give you. So that's where in Club Med since 1950s, which was created like it was created as a non-profit organization to help families who were back from the Holocaust. So a beautiful story. Since the beginning, you had employees from, we call them GO, gracious organizer, from around the world. And there's no other places I know where somebody can start at the reception as a tennis instructor, at the mini club, taking care of the kids, and 7 years later could be general manager of a hotel with 17 million revenue and let's say 300 employees. Okay. So that really had an impact on me as well.
Maybe you can repeat the history of Club Med, because you just more or less scamped over it. Its origin.
It's a wonderful story. I love, for each new employees I have in my team, I will always tell the story. So it's, I've said it several times, or maybe I'm not 100% accurate, but I think I'm 90% accurate. The story was, we have Gerard Blitz. He was a water polo player from the Belgium Olympic team. We're in 1950. We're not in 1970s or 80s. We're in 1950 after the war. And actually 47. And at that time, Gerard Blitz was very touched by what he started to learn what happened in Eastern Europe during the Holocaust period. So he sees all these families who have lost all dignity in themselves. So he decided that he wanted to take them in a place where they could regain their humanity. And to do that, he needed some tents. So he goes to the Trigano, where at that time were the leader in Europe for camping, wanted to meet the CEO, but he couldn't find it. But he found his son, who was to become at one point the CEO of the Trigano organization. And Gilbert Trigano was so touched by the story that Blitz was telling them that he said, you know what, I want to do it with you. And he went to the warehouse and he showed Gerard Blitz all the tents they had. And he said, yeah, actually, after World War II, the Canadian and American army left all their tents, and we just took those tents and maybe we could use them for that project. So in 1947, it was a nonprofit. Some of their friends and themselves took families for, I think, 3 weeks on a boat, and they built a village at that time for all those families. And which is striking is that, of course, because Gerard Blitz was Olympic players, most of the people that came up at that time were all Olympic players from a lot of different countries and a lot of different sports. And that's how Club Med was created a few years later in 1950, first as a nonprofit, still as a nonprofit. And the goal was for families to, meet together in places where there is nothing. They would build a resort, and nearly all of the first staff at that time, called the GO, gracious organizer, were all people who love to be active and being in the wild, and deeply in a mission to connect with those customer, if we could call that customers, to make sure that at the end of their 3 weeks, they could reconnect with nature, reconnect with themselves, reconnect with their loved ones. And I think since 1950s, there've been different chairmen, different shareholders. But I was, even a week ago, in one of the Club Med property, you can find that unique connection in between now the staff and the customer, and people don't necessarily come for the quality of the bed or the room, but they will always tell you that when they come back, they feel reconnected with themselves and their loved one, and that's just beautiful.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that story. Now, a moment ago, you said one of your advice would be make certain that the values of an organization match your own values. Now, you just described to some extent the values of a Club Med organization, but can you know what they are upfront when you apply for a job, or is it something you can only experience?
That's a great question, because most of the time in many companies, the values are like 5 or 6 words, which are on the brochure, and in many times they are very generic. So I think a lot of people now, they use also Glassdoor, which are just website where you have employees or past employees giving their feedback about a company. You can always also ask people in the interviews, but most of the time I would say that it's more difficult now because it's virtual. But I would say I will never I'm going to say that, but in my case in YPO, because of COVID, and I have to do a lot of it virtual. You have to go in person, and if there's a head office, you need to go to the head office, and always arrive at least 30 minutes in advance and just watch. The way the receptionist gonna welcome people, and after it's gonna welcoming up, and is the person's gonna be on time? Is a person's going to go down, take the elevators to welcome you over there, or you're going to be asked to go up? There's a lot of details you can look at on how interaction are in this in the location, and that's a good indicator about what the culture can be. I can tell you that you can go in any Club Med offices. The receptionist will have an amazing smile. She will know your name right away, and she's going to really making sure that you really feel well before an interview. And it could be very different in other organizations where it could be like, you're just part of people waiting. And it's very clear that there's a world between you waiting and the world of the organization. So always look for details, always look for personal stories. When you go to an office, I love to watch all across, is there any photos? Are people are smiling? Is it silence? Do the boss have manager all have the offices next to the windows, or do the boss have an office in center of the office and all the windows are available for everybody?
Okay. Hey,
how is the lunchroom? So not an indication where you can see the culture.
Great story, but I just wanted to put it to practice, because I am now looking in your office. We're looking at your home.
Yes.
See behind you, be your authentic self. For whom is that message there?
It's a message I have because with all my interaction, in the beginning, I was just keeping it just for my employees. Each time I have a meeting with my employees, I had that. And when I was talking to my customer, I was taking out. But actually, it's so important for me that I say, hey, this is me. And people, we always say, it's very interesting because the way you talk for business or in person is the same. And I realized that, especially when I work with a lot of people from different culture, there's a lot of things about our value and ecosystem, but I try to say, okay, just be your authentic self. Just be who you are. If you are in our organization, we want people to bring their own difference, their own diversity. I even say that when we're in a meeting and we are 5 people, we always try to say, okay, who could be missing in the meeting? For example, I remember in Club Med, we're looking at our customer and I say, oh, we have no Brazilian in the discussion now. What the Brazilian would say about that situation. So we really try to foster, I got that in Club Med and I brought that with me, that your organization can be very successful if not only you bring diversity, but you include people in the organization and celebrate their difference. Okay. Otherwise, if you bring diversity and people try to be like the other rest of the group, actually, you're going to reduce the efficiency of your team. Yeah, but if everybody bring that, you have it. So I would say authentic self. And it's, I don't know if you see just behind, but there's a book from Sheryl Sandberg, which is Lean In.
Yeah.
And actually, which is close to be your authentic self. She says the number one advice that Mark Zuckerberg told her was, what would you say if you were not afraid? And I love that one. They're very similar, but I love those two together, is to say, if you always tell what you feel and what's inside of you, then that's where an organization can be successful. If anything you say is just to please the boss or to feel that you belong to that organization, but it's not really you, then either you're in the wrong place or you're not bringing what you should bring to the company you've been hired.
But having said that, I understand the message, but there's also a thing like diplomacy and
yes.
particular culture where you need to save face not only of yourself but also of the person you're talking to. So, given that you've worked for global companies, how do you apply that being your authentic self throughout the globe?
Yeah, I think the first thing is that it have to start from the top. You know, when CEOs say, "Oh, I don't like the culture of my company," you're the culture. That's the number one. So even the thing that, you know, people never remember the mission or the value if at the top we're not, you know, walking the talk. So I try to show it as much as possible myself with my team for now a long time, 15 years. That, you know, I think about that, but each time I would say, hey, don't take my reaction as the CEO saying this is where you should be. I'm just counting. I say, I vote for one in the room. Yeah. So there's a moment where I say, I take the decision, and there's a moment I just vote for one. I was born in France, working in an American company. I've got 2 daughters. They're that age, especially when you talk climate about this is my bias. I got a lot of bias when I say that. And I would encourage people to say, okay, from your own point of view, how you do it. So that's easy when you see how to do it. Okay. I would also say that for somebody who's joining the company, I can tell you that people who dare to raise their hands and asking questions and expressing themselves, not all the time, but they need to think, okay, I think about something I think I care about a lot. And say it, even if there's a top boss around the room, I can tell you with 90% chances that that person's going to be promoted much faster than anybody else.
Okay, now coming back to Undercover Boss.
Yes.
Have you experienced a difference before and after? Because I assume the whole company has saw that episode. I mean, I know it changed you. That's what I've picked up. But did it change leadership team? Did it change senior management? Realize, look, we really have to look at ourselves, at our own organization. So, so basically, it's also a question if you can invite people to be honest, to be authentic. How do you create an environment where there is no risk of actually being your authentic self? Because there are occasions where you can actually jeopardize yourself if you are authentic.
Yeah. So the first thing is that in many cases, and some people have seen it in real, not during the show, but after the show and so on, that when I went in the properties, I was always asking people, you know, feedback, advice from the receptionist to the intern and to the top management. And which was very important. And I learned that from my wife. I was really listening. Like, you know, like, and, you know, sometimes you talk to people and you can see they do this with their head, but actually they're looking at who they're going to talk later. And sometimes for the CEO, you know, they say, oh, you know, who is this intern that just joined up? I would really make a point to really deeply listening everybody who was talking to me. The best politicians actually are the ones who really do that exercise. Really take the extra seconds to really listen, and that challenge yourself about it. And when somebody even overstep the way they say it, which happened to me several times, you know what? You really take the time to say, hey, I really want to thank you for this feedback. And I tell to everybody in the room, this is what we want in an organization. I'm very challenged by that question.
Yeah.
I think it's not really fair in some ways. So of course I take it personally. But I think if somebody in the room expressed that, I mean that this person is not the only one, and we take the time to answer it. So I see sometimes like people like, yeah, authentic self, I'm going to show you. Yeah. So even if they do it with a lack of diplomacy or a lack of maturity, sometimes the youngest one, actually don't go the extra mile saying that's what you're looking for from the rest of the organization.
It's also, as you said, you have to walk the talk, you have to be congruent. So if you are ready to lead by example.
Yeah, and really do it in a mature way, that even if you feel that the person didn't say the right way with a lack of diplomacy and people say, oh my God, what did she or what did he say? You say in a subtle way that, yeah, you agree with everybody that you would have said differently, but you encourage the behavior.
It's the intention which is important. That's why I'm picking up.
Yeah. And you really to care about it. If you don't care about it, don't do it. So that I learned also the other thing, that just be yourself unless you're a jerk.
Well, even jerks can be themselves, but they're going to be lonely. At the end of the day. Hey, the fact that you pointed out the book to Sheryl Sandberg bears me to ask a question. Is she a role model? Is it Quinn? So what are your own role models, or where do you draw inspiration from?
I would say if you ask me if my three role models, they all family members. I don't know if it's why, but I think which is important is that sometimes people in the business, you only know half of the story, if it's not a third of the story. Yeah. So I read the book of Sheryl Sandberg. Her personal story is amazing. I think she's amazing, but I don't really know her. Mm-hmm. So the first person for me was a role model was my granddad. He was a resistant. He lied about his age. He was 17 to be parachute during the resistance, and he was from small island, Corsica Island in south of France, and he was parachute in the middle of France, where he'd never been. I think he never taken the plane before. He survived it. He even saved the lives of Austrian military who were supposed to be completely slaughtered at the end of the war, despite what happened to him. And when he created our own family business, which is a small business in construction, I remember the story that we were playing with other kids, which were from North Africa, which actually I realized were the daughters and sons of his workers, were immigrants from North Africa. And during the weekends, they were helping building the houses of the employees, with the employees, my granddad. And when he died, I remember that I was surrounded by a lot of people crying, including, I remember the faces, but I know these people. And there were those kids of workers who have very limited access to school. And now this daughter and son who I worked with when I was a kid, where now there was one lawyer, one teacher, and I can't remember the last one. And I say, wow. And they were crying because they say, we would have never had being able to do that with your granddad. So this really inspired me as a leader to really care about your employees. You know, people do, oh, what can I do? And they go philanthropy. And I love that aspect of people doing it. I always say, you know, I should start by the people in my team and then my team getting bigger and bigger. But that was a role model from my granddad. Second role model for me was my dad in some ways, was very executive, very successful, who always have time for me. Always. So he was traveling a lot and so on, but I really felt that anytime we were together, he was 100% with me. And he was always making the time, even if he has so many things to do. And it's something I really try to copy with my team, but also with my kids. Like, I know I'm going to travel a lot. I'm not going to be there. But when I'm here and I push the telephone as far as possible from me. And the last role model for me is my wife. My wife has this amazing gift to connect with people, like everybody. And especially when I was in a hotel industry, she would connect with everybody, from the gardener to the receptionist to everybody within the organization. And watching her, I learned how to have that skills, and then that become so much energy and fuel for me to do my work, because I was just not doing for the result. I was not doing just for the strategy, but I just realized that when you take the time to be with everybody within the organization, not only they become more efficient and higher loyalty, but it's beautiful. I think that the beauty when you have a CEO can be a tough job. But when you connect with your employees at a personal level, these 2-3 minutes you have and you spend with any of them, that give me fuel for the rest of the week.
Okay, what you're talking about, some people would call that empathy.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, I'm also hearing you say it's something you can copy, you can learn as an individual.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
that's,
I think
yeah.
no, I think I had empathy as a person.
Mhm.
Otherwise, I would never met the people who were surrounding me. I realized that, as I mentioned before, you can be the same person at work.
Mhm.
And when I started to work, I thought that to be successful in a very competitive environment, which was craft and then Club Med, you have to take the costume of a top executive,
Yeah.
and that empathy, vulnerability, listening, helping was not necessarily the skills to be successful, because it's a pyramid. So to be successful, you need to be better than your other colleagues. So in some ways, you just think that if they're successful, you're going to fail.
Yeah.
Where I quickly realize, and that helped me very quickly, even within craft, is that people will talk to me about what they're working on, even the top bosses, because they couldn't trust anybody else, but they could trust me.
Mhm.
And in some ways, not only was good for me because it was much more enjoyable, but I was able to see where the organization was going. So people say, you have to make your own luck. I was able to get a lot of time promoted within craft in the great position for my career, not only because people say, oh, there's a job, and Xavier was lucky to be available at that time, but when a job was open, they say, oh, what about Xavier? He would be perfect for that job. And Xavier, by the way, would know a little bit earlier than others that this opportunity could be there, because people were talking to me very openly and they knew they could trust me. So another advice when you start in the company, which are highly competitive,
Yeah.
don't think that the success of others is going to be a negative on your side. Actually, people being very close to the people from your peers, and always identify the stars within the organization. We say follow the stars. If you can help a star to be successful, you're going to be successful as well. And if people can trust you, you're going to go at the top level, because trust is the very, very most important things you need to keep and have to be successful in your personal and your professional life.
You mentioned the word success a couple of times. Now, what's your definition of success?
That's a good question. Success, I think the vision of success change with years.
Mhm.
I think that the first thing when you think about success, when you're 20 years old, you did your master degree, you go in the top company, is that, oh, I want to be a director, I want to be a vice president, I want to be successful with a lot of results and have money to have the same car than your boss.
Yeah.
Then success starting to be, oh, I want my team to be successful, I want us to have results. So it's come from me to us. And then you become, I think for me, the epiphany was, I was CEO earlier, I was 31. So around 36, 37, I was starting to have result. And I really felt that for me, I was happy. I feel content. I feel energy. I feel challenged in my job when I could help people to be a better version of themselves.
Okay.
I write down on a piece of paper, which was my purpose in life is, which is an exercise I give a lot of people I'm coaching. And you repeat the sentence and you do it 100 times most of the time. And after 80, 85, I found it. I say, my purpose in life is to create an environment a positive environment, an inclusive environment where people can be driven to be the best version of themselves. And I said my purpose in life was, the Red Bull slogan, give you wings. And I write it on, I have here in front of it's right here. Somebody give me this next to the photo of my kids, and then it helped me. I said, wow, I got it. This is what I want.
Okay, so
yeah.
So good advice is visualizing what you want to be and actually writing that down. When you said you shifted from me to us, is that something when you are just starting off your journey, is that something you can avoid, or is that a phase we all have to go through? Is it just a fact of growing older?
I think it's natural when you go older and you're starting to have some success. I think the new generation, I'm nearly a millennial, but I'm not a millennial. For what I see now, it's ingrained in their DNA. Okay. I think that when I talk, with YPO, I talked with a lot of people just starting companies. I think 99% of entrepreneurs I'm meeting today in their 20s and their 30s, they have a purpose. They're purpose-driven organization. They don't only want to be successful and have money to give money back. They want to create business that have a positive impact for their employees and the communities around them. Nearly 100% of them. And that's why that gives them so much energy to be successful. While in the past, there were a lot of people saying, hey, I'm going to be successful, which for them means I'm going to make a lot of money. And then with that money, I will give money to the philanthropy. Now people are an holistic view about what even business success can be. And a business success includes a sustainable goal. So I think I'm in between generation. For me, it came early in my personal life, but I realized that was my engine for me to be happy in my job, was the ability to impact peers and my team around me. I loved spending time coaching people. And very quickly, I was sometimes given people where we're not sure we would keep. And under my leadership, we find a way that they've been successful. And I did that in craft. Now I'm thinking about it. I also did that with Club Med, where I was a lot of the time, I say, give me the young, ambitious, eager, but still very young people you have in your team. Or also send me people who've been successful in the past, but have not been successful in their last mission. So people say, oh, I don't want to work with that person anymore. But I say, I don't understand. 10 years ago, they were so good. And they will come to our part of the world and they will regain confidence. They will regain juice and energy. They will work with young, very young, ambitious people. And instead of seeing that as a threat, actually, they were bonding very well together. And that was part of the success of the whole, and culture, you might say, and values of our organization, that everybody's welcome. And everybody brings what they have. So some people, they needed the juice of young people to regain love in their job. And for the ambitious, they need people with experience to tell them, hey, you still have things to learn, but I'm going to be there for you.
Good combination. Now, you were a couple of years at YPO, the Young Presidents Organization. Maybe a few words what YPO is for the people who do not know what YPO is.
So I would tell you that, I'm still here, I'm still with YPO, I'm transitioning right now, but it's also a beautiful story. It started at the same time that Club Med. So that's a funny one. And the founder was Ray Hickok. He's 27. And one day he worked for a family business. And Hickoks are building belt, including they were the first one to do seat belt for cars for safety, 1950. And one day, Ray lost his dad, who was also the founder and the CEO of the company. And of course, Ray wanted to be the CEO of this organization, but he was expecting that to happen 20 years later. He's only 27. So on that day, he lost his best friend, his boss, his dad, and the whole family is looking at him. All the employees are looking at him and say, wow, are we all going to lose our job? is he going to be able to do it? The 300 employees at that time, and I think we're in Illinois. And Ray, of course, feel alone at the top, we say imposter syndrome, like many CEOs have. And he's starting to talk to another young CEO and another one, including one which was the CEO of Johnson & Johnson, one of the biggest family business who's still thriving today, still a family business. And they realize, oh, you know what? When we're talking between young leaders like us, we're able to be much more vulnerable about our situation. And actually, we not only talk about business, but we talk about our personal life, our business life. And what they say, oh, we should meet with other people like us, which are very lonely at the top, but eager to learn because we are still up to learn, and also eager to be vulnerable to exchange with each other. So they put, at that time, there was no internet. So they put an ad in a Wall Street Journal and say, hey, let's meet at the Waldorf Astoria in New York. And after 3 times, there were thousands of them. And now YPO, there's like 35,000 CEOs in 152 countries, 50 countries. And there's always that idea that, you have to be, when you enter the organization, you're a young CEO, you're under 45, 55 now for women, because we want to have more and more women within the organization. And this is desire of say, hey, we give you the opportunity to learn from each other. There's a coaching methodology. So CEOs are a group of 7 and can learn from each other, but not only on the personal side, but also on the professional side, on the personal side, on the family side, the 3 components to be successful. You see, it's not only about business, about you and about your family. You're also exposed to the very best program for Harvard, MIT, LBS, INSEAD, and so on. And there is also a program including the spouse and the kids. So all kind of program YPO can provide. But the idea is that every member who join have really this desire to share with each other their own experience with full authenticity. And at the same time, they want to be a better version of themselves. So they want to be better people. So since 1950, this organization has been growing steadily, but there's no desire to be growth for growth. It's a non-profit organization. And you talk about the values very in line with the value I had, which was about authenticity, growing, sharing with others, and also being a better version of yourself.
So, and you've used that quote before we talked about YPO. So
yeah.
That sounds like a perfect match. So your values are very much aligned with the YPO values, and you just, let's say, enhancing them and taking care of them while you are a CIO.
Yeah. And we always say, people ask, what is our revenues? What is our operation model? What are the numbers? The first numbers I gave people is 20 million employees. Our 35,000 members represent 20 million employees. And I always tell people, it's 20 million employees, that's 20 million families. So it's 100 million people that could impact, because we see the level of engagement of employees of our YPO members company are getting better, which means that with a little by little, every work we do as an organization is helping 20 million employees to go back home in a better state that they could have been in another organization. And if people have a better experience at work, then the overall experience of the whole family is also better. And when we hear about all those challenges about mental health, about its impact on the employer, but also on the employees, but also on their family, I think it's a super important role that we have as a nonprofit organization.
That's a great story. Now, Xavier, I'm going to end with one last topic. I have to ask you this. Why do you punish yourself? Why do you run triathlons? Why did you finish Ironman?
So the first thing is that if you do it to punish yourself, it's not going to be a pleasure, right? So I'm not going to say I've got pleasure. Ironman for people, for me in my case was 16 hours and a little bit more, and 30 minutes. So it's very long. You swim for 4 kilometers, then you bike for like a stage of Tour de France, 100 120 miles, 180 kilometers. And then you decide to just run a marathon. I say run is a big word. In my case, it was more a lot of walk than running. I exploded. I think it's the first reason I went into that. It was friendship with friends. So we're starting to do triathlon as a group. I was more a swimmer, and one of my friends was more a runner. The other one was cycling. So we're starting to do a fun relay together. And then it became a lifestyle. We love to being outdoor, and we like it. We love the strategy because triathlon is a lot also about nutrition. And then you want to prove also yourself that there's no limit. It's funny, is triathlon, especially the long distance, like an Ironman, like in a marathon, everybody is a winner. There's not many races like that. And you don't even look at what your score is at. Everybody wants to finish. So when you're at 6 a.m. and the sun is starting to come up, and you see everybody in their swimsuit and their goggles, we all look the same. We all look like penguins, and everybody is touching each other. It's very, very, very unique. It's very profound, that moment where it's going up. In the US, you have the national anthem. In my case, I was in Tremblant. So in Canada, also the Canadian national anthem. And then you start, and you see, it's silence because you're there forever. But everybody is a winner. And actually, it's a beautiful story about triathlon that gives you the vibe of that sport, is that if you finish on the last hour, because you need to finish an Ironman in less than 17 hours, what happens is that everybody who had completed the race is going back to the finish line to help the last runner to finish on time. Because if you do the Ironman in 17 hours and 1 minute, you're not an Ironman. They close the finish line. And in my case, 16:34, it looks like 24 minutes, but at one point I say, calculate in your head, I'm going to make it. Yes, I'm going to make it. But it's striking to see it's midnight, it's cold, you're in a mountain, and then you're starting to see more and more and more people, next to you, as if you were going to win the race, right? There's so many people. And the beauty of it is that when you arrive, the person giving you the medal actually is the winner of the race. So this person had finished the race when I was starting my marathon 7 hours ago, and he's there and he talks to you. And the most beautiful thing, and you'll see I may not be the only one, I talked to this person who won the race. It was the first time he was completing an Ironman, and he won the race. It's a big one. It's a big Ironman. And 6 months later, I received a huge postcard in my house, and I open it and I see half of the finish line. And there were those words, Xavier, this finish line belongs to you as much as it belongs to me. I was like, oh, you could not receive such a beautiful gift from anybody. And that's the beauty of that sport. So yes, you feel pain. At one point, I was like not feeling well during the run, of course. But the sense of community, of overcoming something all together, even if you're alone, you feel you're all together. And the fact that everybody's back at the finish line, say, hey, Xavier, you can do it. You can do it. It's just an amazing experience that I've never felt. I've did so many sports, but this is very, very, very unique. This sense that everybody is a winner. So that's why I like it. Yeah.
Hey, Xavier, we've come to the end of the interview. My takeaway is you are a community man. Doesn't matter if you're in Club Med, if you're in YPO, if you do Ironman, you are part of a community. You create a community. You lead by example. I want to thank you so much for sharing your stories. I know you have so much more out there. Maybe next time. I want to thank you so much.
Absolutely. I love it. Thank you for your time, and thanks for everybody.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.